Hello and welcome back to the Life Beyond Limits podcast. This week I'm joined by Gemma Mercer, who is a maternal wellness coach and matrescence educator, helping busy mums get back into the driving seat of their own lives by rediscovering their sense of identity and working out what they want from life now that they are a mum. Gemma has always battled true inner confidence and imposter syndrome, comparing herself to others and never fully believing in herself. Her self-doubt came to a head shortly after her second child, where the heaviness of the mother load became too much for her and she forgot who she was. Battling mum guilt while trying to rediscover who she was, Gemma came across Matrescence, and so suddenly the fog started to lift as she realized that there was a real reason as to why she felt this way. Since that day, Gemma has developed coping strategies to help her cope with the daily battles of motherhood while growing and scaling her business. Hi, Gem. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
How are you?
I'm really well, thank you, Emma. It's nice to see you.
And you?
Yeah, no, really well.
I'm excited. I'm going to let the audience in on a little secret. I know this young lady for 15 years. We've been in each other's lives. We met through work many years ago, and we've been good friends since. And we actually were pregnant at the same time with my only child and your first child. And so we went through the battles of trying to fall pregnant together, and then being pregnant, and then obviously being mummies. So there's so much there that I want to talk to you about, because there's so much that I relate to, and I know that there's a lot of people that will relate to the struggles of motherhood. The fact that it's the most amazing job in the world, but the reality is that we do lose ourselves in it. And I know that certainly, as much as my son is the best thing that's ever happened to me, my confidence has taken a real dip, and I've had to really learn to get to know myself again, which I know is something that you work on with people, but also is something that you've really struggled with and gone on a journey. So it'd be great to deep dive into that, but I'd just love to just start by just understanding a bit more about sort of your experience with self-doubt, what that was like for you before you became a mum, and then how it then got heightened once you'd had your children.
Yeah, gosh, yes, self-doubt has always been like for many of us, self-doubt has always been a big part of the inside of me, I would say. And previous to motherhood, I threw myself and my self-doubt into powering on with the career. It was like a part of me that was always there, and I needed to just continue to outdo it, continue to push myself, and the self-doubt would never leave, but it would always be really making life tricky for myself, tripping myself up. And it was a need to avoid failure, I would always say. And so you and I met way back in the corporate world, where I was hiding this from everybody, going after job, promoted a few times, and it was a massive part of my self-identity, was this ability to achieve, even though nobody knew how much I was doubting myself inside. So you imagine the pressure that was building up there. So that's pre-kids. A whole story of how pregnancy, came about for me. It wasn't an easy ride, as you well know, but once I was pregnant, and once I was very fortunate to have my two amazing children, I wasn't in that corporate world anymore, and self-doubt started to, it never left, but it was creeping in a completely different way. And this time, because my self-identity had been so wrapped up in tangible success or achievements, ticking things off my list, striving for that next promotion, as soon as I was in mum life, and we all know how many times a day do you feel like you've really ticked a lot of stuff off your list with young children? I mean, it's just a constant battle of putting cushions back on the sofa, for goodness sake, isn't it? And nobody really saying thanks for anything, you know. And so the self-doubt for me really started to kick in a big way, because, as you said perfectly in the introduction there, I lost myself, because everything I knew was this kind of inner like trying to get that perfection of achieving stuff, and it had gone. Completely gone.
It's interesting, because hearing you say that you push through it and the pressures that you're under. Obviously, when I was working with you, me and you've always been close friends, so I saw snippets of it, but I don't think anyone ever fully understands the pressure that we put on ourselves, and we try and mask it in the best way possible. And the thing is, self-doubt is everywhere, and I haven't met one person that doesn't experience self-doubt at some point. But it's when you learn how to manage it, you then are able to go on and do the things that you want to do. And clearly you'd got very good at being one step ahead of your self-doubt, or managing it in a way that drove you essentially to keep proving to yourself that you can do it by getting the promotions. But I know from your experience that obviously that's very tiring as well, when you're always trying to stay one step ahead of it, and you're scared to take that mask off, and that mask can get really, really heavy. Can I just ask a couple of questions before we dive into that a little bit more? As in, what made you feel that you couldn't share that with other people? And what did you think would happen if you took that mask off?
Oh, good questions. Wow. This goes for before and after having children. I just, because nobody, you're so right there. There's a few things in what you've just said. Everybody is feeling it, yet nobody really, apart from things like this podcast, are talking about it. No. So a lot of the mums I talk to, because that's in the forefront now, because that's obviously where I'm at. A lot of the mums will just keep on striving to hide these things. So I can't actually answer that question truly, because when I was not aware of this and not protecting myself like I do now, it was so embedded, it was so deeply ingrained. Does that make sense? It was like you say, a mask, but there was no other alternative. And it made me unwell. Stress, anxiety, shingles, for goodness sake, neck, back and shoulder problems, you name it. Like it takes a physical as well as an emotional strain, and emotional, psychological. It affects everything, doesn't it? Yeah.
Totally. And there's a massive relationship between mental and physical, and often if you're feeling mentally drained, it will show in your physical body. Absolutely.
So no, my answer is I basically used to just push on through, because there was no other option. I guess had been brought up in a world where my parents had been very successful, and it was just what life was. It was just how I had to get on. And you're absolutely right. Very few people were anywhere near aware of how much I was suffering inside. And in fact, I actually bumped into someone I worked in corporate with, and she'd seen the work I'm doing now, and she asked me questions about it, and she said, Gemma, honest to God, out of everyone in that office, never would I have thought that was you. Never.
Yeah.
So,
and sometimes the way people perceive us when we're carrying that mask, I know certainly for years when I was carrying my mask, I was so scared to take it off, because I didn't want to let people down or see the real me, or think I wasn't as strong as they thought I was. And so I had to keep that persona up. And I think there's a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves, that we, even now sometimes, if I admit that I'm not coping, I think, oh God, you know, my husband is going to think differently of me, or my friends will think differently of me, because we're just so scared to be judged.
Yeah.
But, you know, as much as I still experience it occasionally, what I have learned along the way, and I know you now have learned, is that when we embrace our wholeness, life just feels easier, because you're not having to remember which character you are, or put on this mask, this heavy mask every day to please other people. And we've recognized that obviously we need to please ourselves and look after ourselves first, and that will, you know, ultimately ripple effect into other people's relationships with us and what we do.
And I absolutely. And this concept that internal expectation and the, you know, external societal expectations on what it means to be a successful woman or a good mother, whichever lens you want to be looking at, you know, we have these, we are, as women, are brought up with this inside of us to these are the roles that we need to play. And because nobody else is letting other people in to what they're really feeling, we're all doing it to each other. So a big part of what I do now is letting people come round, as much as it goes against everything that I've always aspired to do, but let people come round when there's dirty washing out, you know, or the blooming gardens, you know, the dogs have been creating havoc in there, or, you know, I'm saying silly things, but do you see what I'm saying?
No, I mean, yeah, see the real side of us.
The real side of life with kids, jobs, God knows what else.
Yeah.
You know, and what happens when somebody says they're coming around for a cup of tea? You're frantically cleaning the hob. Like, I can't do that. And I don't want my friend or whoever it is coming round and thinking, well, when Gemma comes round, I best make sure that I've got my nice candles burning, because her house doesn't smell of dog. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to untied, like, I'm not an unclean person, but do you see what I'm saying? There's a balance there, isn't there?
There is. I think we put so many silly pressures, well, I say silly in the quoted term, because the reality is they're small, but we put so much pressure on ourselves and make it into a big thing because of that fear of judgment, but also because we're not feeling great about it ourselves, and so often how we feel on the inside is reflected on the outside. So you mentioned, obviously, you know, all you ever knew really for your coping mechanism with self-doubt was to keep pushing and pushing and pushing, going for promotion and staying one step ahead of it. When you left the corporate world, and I know when I left it, and we were, again, very similar timings with that, there was an exposure that came with that, because suddenly you're stripped of your job title, and you're stripped of a sense of chasing the next job. And, you know, where we worked, we were a worldwide ID. And so no one really knew too much about us. And then suddenly when you go into your own business, it's like, boom, everything that you've hidden suddenly is exposed, because you don't have team members or other things to kind of hide behind. How did that impact you on that self-doubt? How did you manage to cope with that?
Well, for a long time I didn't. Let's be honest. I didn't. It really became quite a problem for me. So how have I dealt with it since then?
Talk through that, Gem, if you wouldn't mind, because obviously, you know, we've mentioned the fact that no one talks about it and everyone's experiencing it. This is what, you know, the podcast is about, is understanding what other people are going through so they can see themselves in it. So when you say you weren't coping, if you don't mind, what did that look like for you? What kind of patterns were coming through?
I hit rock bottom, if you like. At this point in time, I was 2 children in, so I had left my worldwide ID of my corporate company, of everyone knowing who I was, and, you know, having a team behind me, etc., to support everything I was doing. And I was confronted with, okay, for the right reasons, I've decided to leave that career, and was at home with my children. And all of a sudden, you know as well as I do, when you're in that baby phase, you are in almost survival mode, aren't you, of sort of keeping everybody going and everything else. Once that lifted and my first baby was turning 1, I was then pregnant. It happened very quickly for me. I was pregnant with my second within the year, and when Alfie was born, I came out of this baby haze and then looked around thinking, crikey, whoa, where am I? And I was so consumed in trying to keep up that face of a mum with 2 kids doing well, that I realized I'd left my corporate persona behind. I'd left my social persona behind because I wasn't seeing or speaking to any of my friends, barely even many family people, because I was just on this rat race of baby life. And when I finally got out of that baby world, because do you see what I mean with that? Eventually it starts, I mean, they still are hugely dependent on you, but they start to lift in a way that you can start to think about doing things outside of them. I realized how deeply lost I was. And it makes me quite emotional thinking about it, because back then I was avoiding social situations. I wouldn't at all entertain going out to see friends. I would make excuses, because, to go a step further, when I on the odd occasion I did do something like that, just felt like I had nothing to bring to the party. My self-doubt was at such a peak point that I couldn't visibly get words out in a group scenario, because I thought I was thinking things, like, nobody's looking at you, nobody's interested in what you're thinking, people are talking over you. Every second time my mouth would open, I would just my ego would be so consumed in what everyone else was thinking, when actually we were just involved in a nice, happy conversation, and people were genuinely just trying to find out what I'd been up to. But because I didn't have a great deal to talk about, my usual persona of being the life and soul and keeping everyone, I don't know, I just felt like I didn't have much to bring. So I then started avoiding it. Yeah. Which then in turn, to answer the question in terms of what it looked like in my family, I then started resenting my husband because he was doing all of these things and I was at home with the kids out of choice, but also necessity. I was the one not doing anything. And he would seemingly, he's a great guy, don't get me wrong, but he would walk out of the house and be Lee. Happy as Larry. And nothing would really have changed. Yeah. So resentment was building up in my marriage. Resentment was building up with my friends, even my longest standing friends. I mean, you'll testify. I just didn't speak to anybody. No. Yeah, and I don't suppose at the time people really were questioning it, because on the face of it, once again, small talk, I was fine. But yeah, the unraveling had definitely started. I'd gone from being completely in control of, or the premise of being completely in control, to my entire life unraveling underneath me, and motherhood bringing, as everyone will relate to, that are mums out there, just brings this whole world of unknown that I was second guessing 24/7. So anxiety, depressive tendencies, I would say. I did reach out to the doctor and talk to the doctor about, and had some CBT to try and help with my thought processing around it. But yeah, not well, not looking after myself at all, and martyring on. That's probably the best way to describe it. Just completely pushing all of what my needs were as Gemma, and this is now what I talk about to mums. Gemma, who I am as my own human being, and I have needs, wants, desires, and I can still have those needs, wants, and desires, and still love my children unconditionally. But though that person had completely gone, it was quite literally just frantic Gemma looking after 2 kids. Yeah. So it came to boiling point, crunch point. I definitely had a very red ragey conversation with Lee, and the outcome of that was exercise, Gemma. When was the last time you did that? That's something that was you. That was something, you know, it's not for everybody, I know, but for me, that was something that really got the endorphins going for all the right reasons. And I would get out there and start running again. And what happens when you run? You have headspace. And what happens when you have headspace? You listen to podcasts like this. And when you listen to podcasts like this, you learn new techniques or new theories. And it very much was that. I managed to find a podcast that completely changed my life and learned all about the changes that were going on within me because I was now a mum. The process of matrescence, which I talk about, and you know, we can come to. But as a result of doing that, I was able to realize that the feelings I was having were completely normal. It is incredibly common for women to get completely consumed in baby life or young children's life, or indeed older kids' life. And knowing I wasn't alone with that, starting to have the words to articulate how I was feeling within that, enabled me to really start, well, A, learning about it, B, creating space, and C, you know, treating myself with much more compassion and compassion, giving myself the space that I needed and the perspective I needed to see that I was doing a bloody damn job and I am only one human at the end of the day.
Exactly.
So yeah,
and I really want to touch on the matrescence part, because it is a real thing, and I think we as women put pressure on ourselves anyway, and we also aren't brilliant at putting ourselves first and self-care, whether you're a mum or not. But I think when you understand that you are not alone and there's a reason why you're feeling the way that you're feeling, the shift that can have in you in a second is incredible. So I'd love to dive into that in a moment. I just want to go back to a couple of things that you spoke about, because there were some really kind of key points there. Like, obviously, understanding triggers and patterns is one of the easiest ways to help you to manage self-doubt. And that's why I really wanted to ask sort of what patterns you were having, because again, it's educating other people. And social withdrawal is quite a common behavioral pattern where you just don't feel, like you said, you feel a bit empty, you don't have the capacity to engage, don't feel like you're bringing much to the table, and you're kind of consumed into baby life and the mother load, which I know is something that you speak about. There's certainly a few things that I can relate to that I know that other women can, in particular, when you're left with baby. And again, especially now, I know that Alfie was, you felt quite quickly, but I know with your first, that it wasn't quick and you were exploring other things, and me and you were going through heartaches and struggles. And so I don't know about you, but certainly if you've struggled with it and then you've got your dream baby, and then suddenly there are elements of it that perhaps aren't as rosy as you think, you then have the guilt of, well, I've worked really hard for this and this is what I've wanted, and now like it all just feels too much. So I'd love to hear how you would help people to move past that, because I think it's a big one.
Thank you for asking that.
Yeah, you mentioned about you weren't in control of what you knew. And again, I think control is such a big thing. And even though self-doubt's always been with you, you knew how to control it in the corporate world. Suddenly, when you become a mummy, it's the most selfless thing that you do. And for a long time, obviously baby needs come first, especially when you're breastfeeding and you're going through that whole bubble of eat, sleep, feed, repeat type thing. But then it's like you get so caught up in that you then forgot to exercise. And, you know, Lee then said, Gem, that, you know, that's so good for you. That really helps you to create that headspace that you have. It's then trying to bring that back into your routine. And again, managing the guilt. I remember when I had Max, I would plonk him in his, technical term, lovingly place him in his cot and do an exercise, like 10 minutes, quarter of an hour, with him kind of watching me playing. But I guarantee that every time I did that, he would cry and it'd be like, but I'm really trying to do some exercise. But in the end, I had to figure out a way to do it, because I knew that I needed to do that. I needed to have something for me. And even if you grab just 10 minutes, it does make a difference. And you know, it can consume you. I remember when we would meet up with people, and if I hadn't brought Max along, people would be like, oh, where's Max? And it'd be like, oh, sorry, am I not good enough? And when you're already feeling shit anyway, and suddenly people don't want to see you, they want to see your son. And then when they are with you and your son, they're not listening to you because they're too busy cooing over the baby, which we all get. But we sometimes forget that the mum wants to have a conversation and feel heard. And the reality is, we get so excited about new baby and we're like, oh, look how cute, can I have a hug? Can I have a hug? And then you're just staring gazily at this beautiful baby and not really paying attention to the mum. And no, it's never done intentionally at all, but it just builds on stuff that we're already feeling.
Yeah.
And everything that you were talking about, you know, I relate to massively. And what I've then just shared is stuff that I really struggled with. And it was like, sorry, am I just invisible? Shall I just leave Max here and go? Would you even notice if I left? And like,
absolutely. I remember going to a baby class, and well, you think about the baby classes you'll have gone to and how many people knew you as Max's mum.
yeah.
There are still women I will pass in my local town who I know as so-and-so's mum. I have no idea what her name is. No idea. I've even been to a baby class before where they've given the baby a label, a sticky tag, and the mums haven't, you know, got names at all. So this is what I'm saying. There's internal pressures here that we are brought up with, but there is also the external, the societal pressures that we live within, the systemic situation that we are brought up around, that mums are selfless. This is one of the most common thing when I say to somebody, what does a good mother mean to you? What do you feel that looks like? Selfless, self-sacrificing are two of the biggest things that people say. And what does that mean we're doing? We're bringing children up in this world. We are bringing children up to see that that's what mum does. Neglects herself, doesn't look after her own needs. So it is a massive one, definitely. Of course, you know, we are our children's biggest role models at the end of the day, and that is not what we want to be role modeling to them. We need to be showing them that mum deserves to have her own passions, her own priorities, her own identity. So something that you touched on there as well, Em, which is a really important point, and especially, you know, a lot of women who have gone through fertility struggles or pregnancy struggles or difficult births or haven't managed to breastfeed when they wanted to or had to return to work sooner than expected, lots of things, is something called the maternal mandate, whereby we are absolutely embedded within us is that women should do this. We should want to become mothers. We should fall pregnant incredibly at the drop of a hat. We should fall at our knees at any desire our baby needs and love every moment. Breastfeeding is a walk in the park, you know, and smile all the way through it. And of course, that is absolutely not the case for so many of us. And so that self-doubt seed can be planted so early on, can't it? And if we do find that these things don't come instinctively, which quite frankly, why would they? Because we've never done it before. How are we expected to suddenly know how to mother when it's a completely new world that we've just found ourselves in? You know, but that's the point here. You can start to push that self-doubt aside if you actually start to see yourself through this much more realistic lens that of course you don't know, is that cry a cry because baby's tired or hungry? I don't bloody know, the baby's crying. You learn that over time. But why do we find ourselves doubting ourselves? It's so difficult. And I'm talking about young babies, like our children are, you know, 6 and 4 now, and I'm still going through moments of that. Like, I've never had a 6-year-old before. I don't know how to deal with these social things, you know, complex conversations that I'm now having with her about various things. So why would I doubt myself on that? I'm only human and I'm learning every day.
I think, you know, that's the thing, is that whether it's babies or life, like we've never experienced tomorrow until tomorrow comes. Like, we're not expected to know everything, and no one ever knows everything. And I think, again, we put so much pressure on to be perfect or to know everything, or and the reality is that's just not life. Life happens for you, and it comes through taking action, and the how to do any of these things kind of comes through finding out what works and what doesn't. But like you said, I think there's so much environmental and societal pressures that are put on through lack of education, I think, on mums and the modern mum, because, no disrespect, but things have changed from when our parents were mums, and the world has changed. I mean, Christ, the world has changed so much in the last 18 months, but the world has changed, and sometimes I think the views and the opinions of certain people are so out of date that we could never live by their opinion anyway. I mean, the pressure's on. I mean, I was very lucky. I breastfed pretty easily, in fairness. But I remember at the time, before I had my, well, I didn't even know I was having a son. Before I had my baby, I said, if I can, I will. But if I can't, I'm not going to make myself feel like shit. And I don't want anyone telling me that I'm a crap mum. So I kind of warned everyone around me. And again, it's like with the birth plan, you're made to make a birth plan. And so you have this expectation, naive expectation, oh, you know, I'd love candles and soothing music and, you know, water birth and all this kind of shit. And then that doesn't happen. And you think, oh, fuck, I failed already because I planned it and it's now not worked. And if you are a planner,
it's awful.
because some people like are planners and have to, you know every single detail. And all of a sudden it's like, I don't know what to do now, because for the last however many months I've been visualizing this amazing birth and this is what's going to happen, and now it's like something totally different. And again, it's like, you know, the reality is birth plans shouldn't be called birth plans. They should be, in an ideal world, scenario A, B or C, which, you know, these are the things that we're going to run with. But we're told, oh no, it'll be like this, your waters will break and then this will happen, and it's bullshit. Everybody is different, we really are. So moving on to, obviously you mentioned the fact that you'd hit rock bottom, you had a long conversation with Lee, you then started to recognize that you needed to give something back to yourself, and managed to start to go out and run again, and to create that time for you. And in that, you started to listen to podcasts and came across a word that not many people know. I still, whenever I talk about you and what you do, I'm not always the best at explaining what it all means. But you came across the word matrescence, but that word opened up a whole new world to you and took you on a healing journey, and obviously led you to your business, but took you on a healing journey that probably every mother needs to go on, because the reality is, physically we change when we have babies, and mummy brain or baby brain or whatever it is actually a real thing. And we change on how we interact with people and all of that sort of stuff. And yet we can think, oh, we're crazy, or we're losing our mind, like I've forgotten to do this, that and the other. And again, when you're feeling doubtful, that then just piles on the pressure of, well, I'm shit and blah, blah, blah. But you came across matrescence, and it told you, this word told you that actually everything that you're going through is normal. So in an expert way, can you explain more about what this wonderful word of matrescence means, and how that helps you, what it did for you?
I would love to, because I am yet to meet a single mother who has heard of this word. And in the reality, it is just one word. It is just one word, and on its own it doesn't really mean a great deal. It's when you start to put it into context that it really starts to make sense to people. So matrescence itself was first coined in the 1970s by anthropologist Dana Raphael, and basically she termed it as the process of becoming a mother. Okay, which is great. And on paper, okay, we read that and we think, yeah, fine. When it really, and incredible that she did do that in the first instance, but it collected dust, unfortunately, for a little while until it was then put into the context by actually talking about it as matrescence sounds like adolescence. And then we can really start to, this starts to bring something back to us, doesn't it? Because what happens when a child or a teenager is moving through adolescence? We treat them differently, don't we? We give them grace. We see them differently. Because why? They're feeling different. They look different. But there's new expectations on them. They're learning completely new things, financial restraints. You know, they're expected to start being someone in the world and making their own way. And that comes with a huge, huge learning curve and area of uncertainty and self-doubt and questioning and God knows what else. We all get that. And we have these stereotypes of the grumpy teenager Kevin, don't we? Where what do? We give Kevin space because he's changing and he needs that time to come to terms with the fact that he's still Kevin, he's still that person inside, but he now has this totally new area to his persona. And adolescence is exactly the same as matrescence. Matrescence is this for women that are becoming mothers. And yet, when we become mothers, just as you touched on before, we spend all of our pregnancy thinking about the physical act of getting baby home, getting baby out, getting baby home, and the physical needs of baby. At no point, for me, I don't know about you, but for no point did anyone ever say, okay, so once baby's home, what then? How's that going to impact you? How's that going to impact your relationship, your friendships, your financial status? You know, lots of women financially, maybe they've worked previously and when they're on mat leave, they have a completely different view on, you know, the finances in the family. Some choose not to go back to work, some don't go back, some can't go back. Like, it's just, I mean, I can you see? It affects everything.
Yeah, it does.
And so when I was sitting in a pub with a few girlfriends and feeling like, crikes, I've got nothing to talk about apart from the fact that I'm toilet training Alfie. You know, of course that's a big shift for me. And no wonder I had no confidence, because I didn't realise that inside of me I'd gone through a massive change, and what I want now out of life has changed as a result of me now being a mum. And every one of us in one way will be feeling that, in you know. And so some of us, matrescence will affect physically. We will feel physically, look physically, have different relationship with ourselves physically because of matrescence. But sometimes that can just be the pinprick of it. You know, it can be the start of it. Others emotionally, we joke about mums now crying at the drop of a hat or can't watch the news because our entire empathy towards life is different, isn't it, as a result? Whereas some it can affect socially, economically. So the studying I have now done and gone on to become a facilitator in talking to mums now about, okay, let's understand why we're different, and instead of doubting ourselves and putting these pressures on ourselves about that, have the words now to articulate how we're feeling, why we're feeling this way, and that we're not the only one to be feeling it, and it is a real thing. Just like adolescence is a real transition that every child goes through, matrescence is the same.
You know, it's interesting, when you started speaking about that, your whole energy became so much calmer and more nurturing and caring to yourself, and it, to know that it is a thing, a physical and an emotional shift that we have, and that other people go through it, for me is probably the biggest shift, because with everything that went on in my past, for 25 years I felt very alone and misunderstood, and it hasn't really been until I've been doing this podcast and I've met other people that have gone through similar things to me that I've managed to have conversations with people who think like me, who understand what I'm saying, and the healing that has brought me is in a way I just can't describe to other people. And so when you know that matrescence is like adolescence, and it's something that we do go through, and there's nothing wrong with us for going through that, and that other mums are going through the same thing, is just like such a big hug. It's like, thank fuck, I haven't got to do this on my own. There are other people that understand, and I'm not going crazy, because people will often think that, you know, that they are, what were the common things, or the biggest things for you to come out of learning about matrescence that really reassured you and helped you? Because I know that you've mentioned to me that mummy brain is a real thing, and again, I know that is one thing that people worry about, but were there any other things that kind of really popped out and became a bit of a hug or reassurance for you?
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest thing, and it's a concept that goes hand in hand with matrescence, is the inner split of motherhood. In as much as in that instance of bringing baby home, you are not expected, when somebody shouts mum across the street, you are not expected to feel qualified to turn around and say yes. I still find it difficult being Gemma Mercer instead of Gemma Barrett, you know, and I got married however many years ago. Why would we suddenly be able to answer to a completely different name to ourselves the day after we bring baby home? And this is something called the inner split, in as much as you, and it explains how in the same instance you can absolutely love being a mother, want to do anything for the good and safety of your child, but in that same instance it's very natural and normal to have these different feelings about, but I'm also really bloody tired, I just want a break, I'm feeling incredibly touched out today, and I'd quite like to just go and have a bubble bath and read my book. Like, that doesn't make you a selfish person. That is just something that is a real life situation. You have always, for the however, I was 32, I think, when I had my first child, for 31 years I had been Gemma, the leading lady in my show, you know. I was the front line of the act in my life, and overnight I became not even a backing dancer. Like, I was behind stage making everything look good for somebody else.
Oh, I love that analogy.
But isn't it so true?
It is so true, so true.
And that's why, you know, as human beings, we have this huge array of different emotions at any one time. We can feel overjoyed with love and also feel resentment inside because we're exhausted, and that's okay. That's okay.
And it's those words, that's okay, I think are the, you know, the big things, is that is okay. Like,
that's normal.
We put so much pressure and guilt on ourselves, but it's okay. You know, at the end of the day, we are human. Children are humans. They're just smaller versions. They are humans, and so they want downtime sometimes. You know, they don't want to be on the go all the time. And I sometimes think, oh God, you know, Max has been on in front of the TV for a bit too long today. And John, I'll be like, he's tired, Em. Just let him have some downtime. And I'm like, yeah, okay. But you think, oh no, I've got to be playing with them all the time. I need to be doing this. Need to be doing. No, we don't. We don't need to be doing any of that.
Don't need to just do anything. Exactly. Yeah.
Do it because you want to, because then there's enjoyment in it. You know, and all of that stuff. But yeah, we do put so much pressure on ourselves. And I love that whole inner mother split. Did you say it was called?
Inner split.
Inner split.
Yeah. You've always been that one person, and now you're basically split in two, because you're you, and you have this new element to your persona that you've never encountered before. So it's natural that you wouldn't know what to do with it at first. And you know, for those people listening that have got older children, matrescence isn't just relevant to the first stages of motherhood. Actually, the majority of women that I talk to and that actually want to do something about, you know, getting to grips with what they want from life now, have indeed got older children. And I think it's not until you're transitioning into motherhood all the way until you're still transitioning when your kids go off to university or fly the nest, for goodness sake. That's a massive shift in identity as well, isn't it? Of course.
Oh yeah.
So this isn't something that's just for the early days, and actually a lot of more people come to me having got kids at school age, because they've suddenly got a little bit more independence again, and they're like, okay, I'm on my own now, or I can think about my work a little bit more now, or, you know, and that's where it becomes very critical that we start to think about, what does that mean for me now? What do I want from life now that I'm also a mother? And in the lens of seeing it from a self-doubt perspective, not feeling guilty about wanting something for yourself. Like, let's not doubt ourselves, because we're entitled to that.
Yeah. So how have you navigated, obviously having come across matrescence and then dived into it and learned so much about it? What do you now do as a coping mechanism for yourself? Because right at the start we said, you know, it's always there, it's how we manage it. Every day is a new day, so there's always new things to learn, whether it's linked with business or linked with life, or, you know, with children. But with all of this knowledge that you now have, what are your coping strategies that you use that perhaps other people can then look to perhaps try in their life?
For me personally, just having moments of pause and space. And you referred to it, actually, micro moments of doing little things for myself, because I think quite often what we'll do is we'll give ourselves a massive task, like, oh, I'm going to go out on a huge run right now, and being a mum doesn't always lend itself to doing that. So what happens is you end up then not achieving what you set out to do, being frustrated with yourself, being frustrated with the kids, being, you know, it builds, doesn't it? So little micro moments of time for myself, 100%. Reminding myself, I mean, for me it's almost therapy talking to other people about this stuff, because obviously the light bulb moment, like you've just seen in your face, you lit up when you heard about the inner split. Sharing that with other mums is again this reassurance that we're okay. So I would say to people, talk to their friends about this, make sure you're having honest conversations with other mums, so that, you know, that they can start to see where you're coming from. And that in itself, when you start to talk about it, it becomes more real, doesn't it? And it's acceptable almost, or you can see where you're coming from. But certainly just allowing myself that time, because I'm a better mum, I'm nicer to be around, and I show up for my kids 100% more when I do that. So yeah,
effect, isn't it?
The ripple effect is massive. Yeah. So yeah, spending time remembering who I was, you know, and I know I am a recovering perfectionist, like many of us out there. Okay, so I know where I've come from, my story that we talked about before, and I also know I struggle very much with not feeling like I've got a sense of achievement from the day. So for me, I have a lovely planner that, you know, my entire week view, I can see what I need to do and what I need to achieve, and no matter how small, it gets crossed off when it's done. You know, I know it's practice that takes time, but it really helps me to be able to think, you know, we're at a point of, I'm supposed to be applying for Alfie's school placement. He's starting school in September. The old me would have immediately, the day I got the letter through the door, be frantically trying to apply for school places, even though I was doing everything else. But because I've now got this visible ability to see all the things I need to achieve, I can put it in for a week before Christmas when I'm going to be a bit quieter work-wise, or I'm not going to be rushing off to Rainbows to take Imogen to swimming lessons. Like, I can see and start to plan out my life a lot more, which gives me that much more measured effect and that sense of achievement, because I'll be able to do it and I know that it's dealt with, so I can park it. So it's just living a much slower pace, I would say, which isn't always possible, but it certainly gives me a sense of achievement.
And that's the key word. Well, there's a few key words there. Pause, that you mentioned, is really, really massive. Too often people are scared to stop, because if they stop, then they're seen as lazy or not doing enough, or feel guilty. But a lot of the magical things come when we pause, when we stop. We refuel for a start, so we come back stronger, better, lighter, happier, which then has the ability to totally transform our whole day, and therefore the lives and days of people that will be in our company. And you mentioned slower pace as well, and also about just doing the little things. But I think the biggest thing that came through, and it's something that women don't do enough, men probably do it a little bit better, but I think generally we don't do it enough. It's a sense of achievement and celebration. Like, when we do things and we tick it off, it's owning, just giving ourselves that moment to acknowledge that we've done it. For one, which we just skip past and move on to the next one. Even though we could do 10 things and not do one, we won't celebrate or acknowledge those 10. We'll acknowledge the one we've not done and cling to, oh, why didn't I do that? And it's so important to acknowledge what you've done rather than what you've not done, and to celebrate it, because when we celebrate it, we're giving ourselves compassion, we're acknowledging ourselves. Quite often we feel invisible by other people, but if you're not even seeing yourself, how are other people meant to see you? So acknowledge yourself for what you've achieved and own it. And this is really cool, because today's been a day. Like, I've had 2 seconds to myself and I've still managed to do a couple of things that I needed to get done. Good for me. It's like those types of shifts make a big difference to how we're feeling, and ultimately how we feel will affect what we're thinking and how we're showing up in the world, and then the outcomes that we get. So if we can really acknowledge how we feel and own that good feeling rather than just sitting with the bad feelings, that tiny little insight into goodness will grow and grow, and it will increase our energy. It will then allow our minds to think differently, for us to view things differently, it's got the ability, 1 millimeter shift, to change your whole direction in lilife.
Totally.
So it is the small things, like you say. Gems, there's so much that we could continue to talk about, and I'm conscious of time. Is there anything that you feel that you needed to hear when you were in the thick of it, or that intuitively you want to share with people right now that might help them or make a difference to them?
I've said most of it. I've said most of it, but I would say again, just to reiterate, talk to your mum friends about the mother load, the juggle, the ongoing mental haze that you're feeling, because in doing so, you're bringing it to the forefront for yourself, stopping to think about what you are achieving, what you are contending with. And you're also giving her that excuse as well, or not excuse, but that opportunity to see it for herself as well. Because there are so many, I've done it this morning, I've been at school and I've seen all the mums doing their thing, rushing, and putting on a smile throughout it. And as much as, smiles are often fun and everything else, they can also be there to hide stuff that's going on behind. And I think if we're much more honest with our friends about, it just gives light to everything.
It really does bring it together, and it takes one person. And I think this is the thing that I've always felt is, we're speaking about motherhood, but when I went through my miscarriages, no one really talks about miscarriages. And when I said I'd had one, the amount of people that then said, well, so have I. and you see their shoulders just drop, and it's like, oh, thank God you've mentioned it, I can now talk about it. And I think it's to not be afraid to talk about it, because if you're feeling it, whatever it is, it could be about mum life, but it could be about business, relationships, whatever. If you're feeling it, there's a high chance someone that you know is feeling it too. And if you have the confidence to speak to people about it, then it will bring you all together, and that's what makes the difference. So yeah, definitely talking about it, I think, is really, really important, like you say. Gem, how can people stay connected to you, or if they want to find out a bit more about Matrescence or whatever, where can they find you?
So the best place is my website, which is www.mummymetime.co.uk, or I'm also on the gram. Instagram is at Mummy Me Time Community. You can find me there as well, or indeed just reach out by email, Gemma at mummymetime.co.uk, and it's Gemma with a G. But yeah, I get people contacting me all the time now, which is wonderful, just saying, oh my God, Matrescence, this is a thing. So if you've had that moment, I would love you to just reach out and tell me, because yeah, or indeed if people are listening that have heard of it before, tell me that too, because I'm yet to find one.
Yeah, it's been amazing. And I think, the fact that not many people know about Matrescence really shows that we really need to start to build awareness around that, because the more education, the more awareness we have, the more knowledge we have, the easier it is to navigate through things. And so I love what you do, anyway, because I love you, but I love what you're doing, and I know that it's making a massive difference. And I know that if anyone has been listening to this, and this has hit home to you, or it's given you some support, like a virtual hug or just some reassurance, know that we're all going through it in our own way, and that you're not alone. But if there's anything that has come from this episode, and you have questions or you're looking for support, then please reach out, because that's what we're here for. And so if you have any questions for either myself or for Gemma, then please drop us a message and we will do the best to support you. If that's not what you want to do, look for other friends around you that perhaps are going through the same thing, and maybe look to build a bit of a community that way. But Gems, it's been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on here. As you know, we could talk for hours, and I might even bring you back, because I do really believe that this is something that needs exploring a lot more. And I'm like on a mission to educate the world. But it's been awesome. So thank you so much. And thank you everybody for listening. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. So bye for now.